Okay, this is a video about how I swapped out the engines in this John Deere tractor, lawnmower, I should say. This is an LA 125. I've had it, it's been really good. I've had it maybe 12, 13 years now, and maintained it pretty well. About second or third mow of the season, I was mowing and all of a sudden a loud bang in the engine and it died. So I pulled it up into the garage, did a lot of the diagnosis that I could. I mean, I checked the fuel pump, I checked spark plug, I sparked everything. It would, the flywheel would spin, but it would not turn over and it wouldn't start. I tried, I don't know, I just checked a lot of things I could find on YouTube. I am not a mechanic, I'm just a homeowner. I don't know what things are called. I've never done any engine work before, so this is hopefully some help of what I went through to fix this. Now I did take out the spark plug in the old engine. So here's the old engine. This is the 21 horsepower Intech John Deere Briggs and Stratton that died, that I was successful in taking back out. They don't make this engine anymore, but what I did determine I wanted to get a new engine was two things. One, I did take spark plug out. This would spin freely. It didn't seem like I was getting any compression. I put a screwdriver in the spark plug hole. The pistons weren't moving. I'm not about to tear it apart and put a new crankshaft or rods or whatever's broken. So I just decided sold, and have someone fix it who knows what they're doing would probably cost, I don't know, 500 bucks in a couple weeks worth of time. What I did was I looked online, and lo and behold, you can buy a whole new engine for 500 bucks. They don't make the old engine anymore. They make this 19 horsepower professional series. This is the manual 310000 or the 330000. I did that because I couldn't find any other things, like I couldn't find the flux capacitor, and I didn't know what else to do. So some of the videos on YouTube are helpful, showing replacing Briggs and Stratton engines, but they're not one-to-one to these models, and sometimes the engines are a little different. So one of the guys said it took him an hour to replace. Maybe if you really knew what you were doing, but even so, it's not going to be the same as this engine. So I did, it took me significantly longer, and I did have some, another pair of hands to help me. So I'll go over maybe what you need and how I did it. Hopefully I can help someone like a lot of the YouTube videos have helped me. Things you're going to need. If you do have a lift, it definitely will help. I bought this lift for this. It's okay, the Club Cadet. Specific tools you need, I didn't have everything. If you're a mechanic, just fast forward a few seconds, 15 seconds, so you don't see this. This is the Frankenstein ratchet that I put together. This is a 3/8 inch drive with a 1/2 inch adapter, 1/2 inch extension back to 3/8 and 5/8 long socket. You'll need this to get into the bottom bolts you need to take off. There's a mismatch of all kinds of different screws on here, from these Star Torx to metric to English to you name it. I didn't have every single socket, so I did improvise on some. Other tools, really the socket's the biggest thing in getting this thing apart. So you don't need a lot of specific tools, but the torque wrench bit set you will need for some of the bits. Keeping the lid, I did find the hood here that a couple of golf balls in these little sockets would keep the hood open nicely for me. I didn't feel like taking it off. These are actually metric here. I didn't have anything, and they were real pain to get off with the wrench. I'll go in reverse of what you need to take off to take the old engine off. First, of course, disconnect the battery. The fuel pump here needs to be disconnected. Disconnect it here from the fuel line coming from the fuel tank. This is the new fuel filter on the new engine. We just take this bracket down and watch out for the gas coming out. You will need to take, you'll need to take this torque screw out here, and the throttle assembly line. It just kind of bends and pulls out. Also, you'll need to take off the starter wire and just pull apart this wiring harness, and then down to the underside. On the underside of the engine, there's really five things. There are these bolts that I'm trying to point out here. Those 5/8 bolts, there's 4 of them, 2 on either side. And you also need to take off the pulley. And that's going to be a little bit more specific. For the pulley, you want to make sure that the engine, the parking brake's on. That will loosen up some of these belts so that you can get it off. Now, when you try to pull this bolt off here for the pulley, this spins freely. So you'll need somehow to hold it up, which took me a second. But what you can do is, if you have a screwdriver, you can put it in these holes, and that will brace the pulley from the pulley here from spinning while you try to take off this bolt. A note on the bolts: when you take the old engine out, you'll still use the same bolts. These are look like they're threaded, obviously, from the old engine. The new engine's bolts do not come pre-threaded. So what I did was, I don't have a die and tap kit, so I used the bolts, and while the new engine was out, I went ahead and threaded the bolts in to create the threads. So when I dropped the engine in, it was much easier to put the bolts in. I couldn't imagine doing it from underneath while the engine was on top. Would be a lot harder. So I recommend threading these on the new engine before you drop the engine. So another issue was this muffler. The old engine had a muffler pipe, just a muffler pipe that went into this hole here and to this muffler box down here. The new engine, however, comes with this side-mounted muffler. So the intention was to take that off and replace it with the other muffler pipe, which I believe would fit. Unfortunately, I had no tool to get these torques or whatever kind of nuts they are, or screws they are, on this muffler extension. So I thought I'd just leave the muffler on and no issues, right? Well, it doesn't really fit on this bar right here. The muffler comes down, hits this bar, which will not allow the side of the engine to come down enough to put this bolt in. There'll be a gap. It sits right on top of this. So since I didn't have the right screwdriver and could not go to the store to get one, I used the next best tool I had, and instead of the screwdriver, I pounded a little dent into the back side of this soft aluminum muffler to let it fit snugly on this, which I will say why was not a good idea a little bit later. The main issue with connecting back this throttle wire is that there are two things that they don't tell you. One, it came with a black tab in this hole here that you need to pull out. And secondly, it comes with, in this hole where the R is, there's a torque screw that is just in there. I didn't know what that was for, but I put the wire back on. It's in the run position. You can see here it's right about here in the run position. So maybe that's what the R stands for. I didn't know. But if that screws in, it will not allow this throttle to go to the choke position. It's locked here. That screw in that R position prevents it from going into the choke. So you need to remove that torque screw out of this R for it to allow it to set back to go into the choke position and all the way down. So I assume that R there looking back is to lock it in place so you don't have to guess where the run position is. You just go ahead, put it in there with that in, set the run position, tighten it down, and you're good to go. But I didn't do that. So just another gotcha to help you out. After it's back in, everything's connected. Really, it's all the hard parts done. A quart and a half of oil was good enough to get up to the fill, and a couple seconds of cranking, and we were there. Okay, now for full disclosure. I did mow the yard once already with the new engine to make sure everything worked. Everything was fine. The issue with the muffler, as you may have guessed and can see, this is what happened after I mowed the yard for the first time. It's not a good idea to leave that muffler exhausting over this cheap plastic frame. So I'm gonna have to go find that tool and take off this muffler and put back in the other muffler pipe that I had here onto the engine. Hopefully, I bet it will thread back down into the old muffler area. So don't be like me. But so there you go. That was my journey. It took me several more hours than one to get everything figured out, but I guess better than buying another couple $1,000 mower. And thanks to everybody on YouTube for at least getting me most of the way there. Okay, last update to the story. The issues with the muffler box. So I should have done this before I even tried to mow it the first time. But I finally got the tools to remove these first two bolts. Were easy to take off the muffler. They came off. And then I had to take off also this extension here, this muffler pipe extension, and that was in here. But this was the tough part because I did not have what I now know is a Torx 45. So this is a 45 Torx end to this. It's the second biggest one I could find in the local hardware store, and it's nice and long to fit in here to get these two screws here that are Torx ended. So I needed to do that to remove those, and this is the old muffler pipe that came off my old mower. So I removed the muffler from this professional series and put back on the pipe, which I think they assume people would do since you can't buy the old engine, because this fits very nicely in the same holes and then goes right down into the original muffler box. So a T45 sized wrench, and you'll be able to get those off in a jiffy. Could not do it with anything else. And a little hard to access down in here with that previous extension in there. But that's it. So that's the last piece of the puzzle to get this one 100% done. So a couple mows now, everything's been solid. I hope this helped.